Welcome to Design Talks Now, hosted by Design Pavilion in support of New York City's international design community. I'm Eileen Shaw, producer of Design Talks and Design Pavilion. Our mission is to increase public awareness of, and thus the value of, design thinking, services, and projects. This series launched in May in celebration of NYC by Design. It's, of course, our virtual response to the COVID shutdown. We're encouraged to keep the conversations going with a platform for sharing. And we're really interested in what's on your mind and what matters to you now. We're here by documenting our joint experiences during this extraordinary time, and you're a part of this time capsule. As we further our journey into this incredible moment, the conversations and theories and visions become richer, and we're getting a peek into the future. Today's talk, entitled Designing from Our Human Vulnerability, is based on the understanding that exploration will be determined by the courage to take risks and pursue uncommon paths in order to provide design solutions that open new possibilities at a time when unknown possibility is exactly what we face. I'm very pleased to introduce the talented architect and professor Michel Roquind, founding partner of Roquind Arquitectos. In 2017, the New York Times named Michel as part of a generation of architects making its mark at dizzying speed. Well, that's certainly so. Michel currently joined with the We Company as Senior Vice President of Architecture, leading all WeWork construction projects. And in conversation with Michel, I'm also very happy to introduce Spencer Bailey, co-founder of the media company The Slowdown and co-host of the Time-Sensitive podcast. A writer, editor, and journalist for a variety of leading publications, Spencer is also the editor-at-large of the book publisher Phaidon and a contributing editor at Town & Country magazine. From 2013 to 2018, Spencer was editor-in-chief of Surface magazine. This is quite an inspiring talk that builds, and I hope you'll see it through with us to the end when we reveal a timely concept. And so here we are, and now let's begin.
Thank you, Eileen. Hi, Michel. How are you?
Good. Thank you, Eileen. Pleasure to be here, and especially with Spencer, good friend, and a lot of more things over time, but happy to be here.
Yeah, and I see you've gotten back to New York. You're in your New York apartment.
Yes. I spent a long time back in Mexico. I was there for almost 3 months, which was really good being there with the family, and trying to make sense of all of this, trying to understand what was going on and what's the best advantage to really rethink a lot of stuff that was going on through our heads that I believe that we all went through this emotional roller coaster of crazy things, but yeah, now in New York.
Yeah, and now we're almost 4 months into this pandemic. How have you kind of coped and dealt and thought about what it means to quarantine, what it means to be going through this as a world?
Well, first of all, I think we all went through this shock phase, like what's going on? What's this uncertainty? Are we really gonna quarantine? Is it really necessary? I think we all went through, again, I was saying, like all these roller coaster of emotions where you were frustrated and then angry at why aren't we collaborating more as a global population, as humanity in general? Why aren't we sharing trivial information between countries that would eventually make us react in a better way? Then you start understanding also, you start figuring out what's going to happen with your business, with what you're doing and your people and your own environment, of how can you help the service people that were working with you to let them go in quarantine so they can be safe. Also passing through the importance of, I can stay at home. So if I can stay at home, I'm a privileged person that doesn't have to be out there working in the front line, trying to help the world move in a more efficient way to kind of solve this global problem. So if I'm one of the privileged ones, how can I help the other less privileged people through the way, not only talking about the profession, and I think we talked about this before, Spencer, that people think like, what am I going to do if I'm a lawyer? It's like, forget about if you're a lawyer, an architect. I mean, it's not relevant right now. The relevance is how can you react as a human being, first of all? And then as a human being, what's your natural connection? And then from your profession, of course, if from your profession you can do important changes, I think that's definitely important. So in this whole going inside and rethinking what's going on, I think one of the most important things, at least to me, is that we have to come out stronger. In a personal level, I want to come out stronger from this pandemic. I want to come out more in sync with my humanity. I want to come out of this pandemic more ready than ever to really understand if I'm part of the problem or I'm part of the solution that got us here. No, not only just because of the pandemics, because the pandemic is showing us this super vulnerable moment that we are right now as humanity. So I've spent a lot of time with my daughter that I love, of course, and that's not going to come back at all. So it's been 4 months of having these amazing conversations in the broader sense, like of everything, which is beautiful, and uniting us more as a family. So I think that this slowdown, if people took advantage of it in a good way, and again, talking about we're privileged because we're in our homes, where we don't have to go out there and be working or risking our lives every single day helping on the front lines. So how can I really come out of this in a much, much better way, prepared for this, whatever sort of normal or new world people are talking about? No? How can I be more reactive, more conscious, and more understanding of how to recalibrate these broken systems, no?
Yeah. I mean, my feeling about a lot of this has been a turning inward, and I've been hoping that more people are doing the same, that this is a moment to actually reflect a lot. And I think the protests and what's happening, post George Floyd, that's causing even more people to be thinking about this. But I can't help but think that the definition of home is really shifting. Like, pre-pandemic, we didn't think about the home so much as like a refuge. It was like where you had your bed, and it was where you could maybe relax and read and sleep. But like, at least in a dense urban place like New York City, a lot of people were just live in boxes, and it's their life is the city. So I think this is really like, brought home the idea of what it means to be home, what it means to actually have a place of comfort, of refuge. And connected to that, I think it's like finding refuge within yourself. And, I think you and I both share this, like, pre-pandemic, we travel a lot. We're constantly on planes. And I think that this slowdown, this basically not only slowdown, but like staying put has really forced a lot of people, myself included, to really ask questions about like, well, is all that travel necessary? Do we need to go to the office every day even? Do we need to do a lot of the things that we have for so long have been doing? And the answer a lot of the times is no. And so I think actually, if we keep asking those questions and we keep chipping away at them, probably on the other side of this, we're going to find that there's a lot of solutions that were probably just staring us in the face. We were all just too busy kind of living, pre-pandemic life to consider that. And I think that hopefully there'll be some really profound changes that come out of this as a result of this turning inward, as a result of this staying put, as a result of this slowing down.
I mean, totally. And coming back to the home, the house, it's very interesting because for us as architects, we always have valued what a home means, what a refuge means. But it's interesting to see how people haven't paid that much attention up until now. I think that today, if you talk to people about what your home represents, it's a whole different story. And it's interesting because most of us have been 3 months or 4 months within a home where you're questioning a lot of things. What is my home made of? What is all these things that have accumulated over time and made my home? No, so it's inevitable to start cleaning up your home. It's inevitable to say, I haven't used this in a while, I can give it away, or I haven't used this, I can throw it away because it's not useful anymore. But I always used it as an analogy, saying like, clean your house. And in the same way that you're cleaning your house, clean yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Go inside yourself and clean all the stuff that you've accumulated over time that have made you the person that you are right now, for good and for bad. But we all have all these bad things that we can work on. I mean, we call it shadow work, but it's like, when do we have the time to really work, not only on the stuff that I want to change about myself, but also understand in a broader perspective, again, if I'm part of the solution or part of the problem. Because most of the times we're doing our work and we're so concentrated on, oh, I'm just doing these type of buildings and it's okay. And if you zoom out, it's like, whoa, these type of buildings are part of the problem because they're doing this and this and this with society, and they're not creating diversity, and they're not creating social reconstructions or rebuilding social tissues. So, I mean, it's a good time to reflect on that. What do I do with my spaces within the house? The home was really not utilized as much as it should, because you would have breakfast, leave the home, and then come back at night. So it's like, wait a minute, now I can maybe work from home part of the day, part-time home office and part-time office. So now the commuting is not as crowded anymore outside, because we're doing these shifts on how I can take advantage most of the time from home and most of the time from a space that I might need to go if there's a need. Because again, the question is that it changes like the typical home that you had before. If somebody remembers the dens, that your father used to have a den that nobody could get in the den because your father was working from there, now becomes sort of a co-working family thing where your kids are in school and you're working and you're Zooming at the same time. So I found it very interesting to have these collaborations where I was with my headphones in a meeting and my daughter was doing her school online. And we were sharing that space, and it was kind of nice to be with her because I would miss that experience from her being in school. So again, I think that the importance of how we're going to use our homes or value our homes and value commuting or not commuting is changing dramatically. It's not going to go back to normal at all.
No. And this social norm of the 20th century, or idea that there should be a quote breadwinner in the family and somebody else stays home to take care of the kids, that long dead idea is only shifting more and more through this. And technology, the idea, the notion of the home office, all of this is changing. Like, there should be no reason that somebody, if they wanted to go spend a summer in a different location with their family for a month or 2 or 3 months, could conceivably do that while still working, while still raising a family. Like, the flexibility that's allowed because of technology now, and the fluidity between, space that's allowed because of economies like Airbnb, and, the ability to just pick up and leave. And I think there's a whole generation coming up as well that doesn't really care about owning things. It's like, they care about sharing, they care about quality, but I don't think they necessarily care about ownership.
No, and talking about, it's interesting because now, I've had these conversations with companies that are even thinking of implementing kind of a month or something that would replicate a quarantine time, where they say, what happens if we have like a getaway month with all the employees of the company? They can bring their families, we can be in a place connected to nature, like a kind of slowdown that is provided now by the company. And I thought that was a beautiful idea. Because if out of this came something that as societies you would say, let's take 1 month a year, all of us in quarantine, because we want to let the world and the earth breathe again. Yeah. We want to, let's do it because we're giving part of ourselves as a gesture, like a I don't know, a generous way of saying, let's do it again, but let's do it because we want to create these changes. And I think that's very important. And the other thing about technology, which is interesting to recognize, we think of technology as this cold thing, but now that we had these Zoom meetings with a lot of people, I get to see your house and I get to see your plants behind you, and my daughter can pass behind me, or then members of my family. So it's kind of like yes, we're kind of disconnected, but we're highly connected and we're more vulnerable.
Yeah.
I can see, I mean, I can't see if you're wearing like your pajamas underneath, but but it's like, but you're seeing like more chilled about the idea that this is who I am. And what needs to be valued is what I can bring to the table in any conversation, and not if I'm dressed up for the occasion or if I'm in my fancy office space or my fancy apartment. So that is changing a little bit, and I think that's very relevant. And just coming back to, I mean, I know we'll touch the subject, but coming back to the protests and everything that's been going on right now, I think definitely we have been more vulnerable. So that amount of vulnerability has put us in a place where we resonate as humans. Forget about nationalities. We're resonating on a very emotional and deep level of what's happening in the world. So to me, it's fascinating because it's one of the biggest waking up moments that we've ever had.
Right.
Because a collective waking up.
Well, in the culture of convenience, which led to so much of, a dumbing down of our senses, and that's largely sans maybe Amazon on pause right now. I mean, so many of the conveniences of our life before, they're not here anymore. So I think what's sort of come out of this slowdown also is a friction, a necessary friction, and a friction we all have to and should feel within ourselves. Not to sound like all yoga teacher or anything.
No, but it's like, I mean, the way we talk even to, I mean, you don't have kids yet, Spencer, but I have my 15-year-old daughter, Nina, but we call it the growing pains, no? I mean, it's interesting because they're highly uncomfortable, but they're necessary.
No, I mean, completely. And we need this rhythm. You and I are both drummers, so we kind of resonate on that frequency. But I think in general, human beings need rhythm. They need rhythm in their lives, rhythm in their schedules, rhythm in their cities, in their public spaces, in their towns, in their homes, kind of everywhere. One thing that I think is interesting is, you bring up this notion of like a slow down month or sort of thing. We, Andrew, who I know you know well, did the elephant behind you, and I co-founded the Slowdown with. We interviewed Eddie Stern, who's an Ashtanga yoga teacher, on our At a Distance podcast. Eddie spoke to us about this idea of slow down days, which I really liked, which is, sort of the idea, like, what if we all took a day once a month to let the world breathe, to let each other breathe, to let a city breathe. Maybe it means closing down certain streets in the city. Maybe it means turning the power off for a few hours so the city's not consuming. All these different things. And I thought, how cool would it be if that just became a global campaign, that slow down days could become something that we take around the world. You go to mayors in Berlin and Reykjavik and Johannesburg, and you talk to them about, how do we integrate this slowdown idea into your city? And can we pick a few days a year where we do that? And it might include conversations like the one we're having, where there's live events and concerts, art, culture, things that actually engage us and allow us to slow down, allow us to feel the frequency of really what it means to be human, and to get us away from this convenience culture. This culture that, frankly, is, I think, while in many ways it makes life a lot easier and simple, it takes us away from a lot of the feelings we have right now when we're cooking 3 meals a day, when we're at home and we have 30 minutes to read a book or listen to a podcast or call a friend.
No, I mean, I think it's incredibly important to acknowledge that, and to acknowledge that at least I've taken advantage of this moment in any way I can. I love it. I'm reading more, I'm meditating more, I'm doing more exercise. And it becomes, again, this consciousness of where do I want to be? What do I want to do? When you're talking about the way we were consuming things, and I hope we really change that in that direction, because why, if we're all, or I can't remember what percentage of the world is quarantined right now, and we're only consuming what we need, why is there going to be a recession? If we're consuming what we really need as a human population. So what were we consuming before that created an economy that could go now into a recession? No, it's like crazy. All the amount of consumption that we didn't need that was happening. So, I mean, there's great conversation, Spencer, out there about calendar events saying like, why does the whole population need to go on vacation on summer? So if the problem is that summer creates this amount of tourism for different countries, but then they have like a super downfall the rest of the year, and then December comes and then it's a high season again. It's like, if we separate that, I don't know, parts of the world go out for summer vacations in a certain period, and then another population, we're kind of balancing that all year round. It's going to be good season because there are no highs and lows. So we're always these extreme contrasts where I think it's much better because you'll find flights, you'll find hotels, you'll find less crowded beaches, you'll find less crowded forests. So this idea of rescheduling ourselves and kind of recalibrating or understanding how we can reprogram ourselves to re-interact in a better way, because definitely we need to recalibrate our relationship to ourselves. We need to recalibrate our relationship to others, but we also need to recalibrate our relationship to nature and to the planet we live in, because that's what got us here in the first place. Our crazy relationships that we created, or these systems that they're proven wrong. So again, most of the problems that we're seeing now, they're more systemic problems than actually what people read kind of a superficial thing, no?
Well, I think about like the word immunity, this idea of immunity, and where does that come from and how does it make you feel? And another person Andrew and I interviewed on the podcast, Dr. Alejandro Younger, talked to us about how immunity starts in the kitchen. And it's this idea of like really understanding what it is you're putting into your body and where that comes from. And where that comes from is nature. And how we treat that is a very huge process. And this is a lot of the ideals of the slow food movement, which obviously, goes back several decades now. I think it's fascinating to think about slow food in multiple contexts. We could talk about slow design. We could talk about slow spaces. We could talk about slow media, which is certainly something that influenced Andrew and me in creating the slowdown, and just thinking about like what it means to consume anything, even the word consumption, and rethinking that. Like, should we be, quote, consuming media? Should we be consuming food? No, we should be eating food. We should be engaging media, reading, listening, watching. Like, it isn't about consumption. And yet we've come to a place in culture where basically everything is about consumption.
Yeah, I think one of the best phrases that come to mind, I can't remember the exact words, but I remember Brian Eno saying that we should all be gardeners, no? He would say something like, if we all had the mentality of seeing our work as gardeners, where we have to prepare the earth and then know what seeds we need to plant, and then plant the seeds and then water them and take care of them and nourish them in order to see what comes out. If that analogy would take it to our own professions and the way we do things, that would be beautiful, because there is no instant fix. There is no, I want to plant the seed and sit down and have a meal. Well, you can't have a meal because the plant needs to grow. And by the time it needs to grow, you can pick whatever vegetables or fruits or whatever the plant gives you, and then you can sit down and eat. But you need to take care of the plant all the time, which makes a relationship very different. So we need to reframe how we got here. Again, as we're seeing today, which to me, I'm totally blown away, because I think this is an amazing global human wake-up call. I'm having conversations with my daughter, of course, about everything that's going on. She's like, oh, Dad, are you going to go to New York and are you going to be part of the protest? Yes, I want to go out in the streets as I did in Mexico and as I've been doing, because we need to be part of this. But if my 15-year-old daughter is talking about this, she's going to find a different way. And I think that's very, very interesting to see. And I remember this video that went viral, that there was these 3 generations of people in the protests talking about the protest. And there was a 70-year-old guy and a 50-year-old guy and a 15-year-old guy. And the 50-year-old guy said, the 70-year-old guy didn't know how to fix it. We're here fighting and we don't know how to fix it because it's getting very violent. So he grabs the 15-year-old kid and he tells him, figure out a way, be more intelligent than us and figure out a way from the roots. not from a protest in the street, but really from the roots, no?
So much of it starts in childhood and has to do with childhood trauma and how you're treated by your parents, by your peers, by your teachers, and what's taught in the home, what's taught in the classroom. I feel so lucky to have taken a class in undergrad college of racial politics of American pop music, because like, who else gets to really take that kind of class? Like, you have to be at a special, institution that's going to teach you that kind of class. I think everyone should take a class like that, should understand the lineage of music across centuries, should understand how Michael Jackson connects to slavery and blackface minstrelsy. But unfortunately, that history has been buried. And memory, unfortunately, is like something that I think we don't give enough credence to, we don't think about, we aren't concerned enough with in our world. We can say, oh, well, people should read, Noah Yuval Harari, or people should read, Ta-Nehisi Coates, but only so many people are going to read. And so how do you get the messages that are in those books about how we got here, about racial injustice, about inequality, about these things that really do matter in the culture? How do you get those to the forefront at a time when I think a lot of it is kind of stuck in certain societal or cultural circles, but not really?
I mean, I think first of all, we have to recognize that this is a systemic problem. Racial issues, injustice. I mean, it's something that needs to change from the roots of it, because otherwise we're fighting the surface of it, and we're actually exposing now the police, and we're exposing the laws, and we're exposing this and that, which is crazy, because the bottom is what's really needs to be taken out from the root to start with.
Well, it goes back to COVID. It goes back to this little piece of RNA that's infecting millions of people around the world, and the fact that we've mistreated nature and we've mistreated each other, and all of this is systemically connected. These protests are also a result of COVID. They're a result of racial injustice and many, many things, but COVID is also a player in this.
It puts everybody in the same, well, it's supposed to put everybody in the same position, because we're supposed to be equally vulnerable, which we're not. Because if you have more resources, you can protect yourself and isolate yourself. If I don't have resources, or I don't have a home, I cannot protect myself the same way as everybody. But the basic reasoning, it can attack anybody. It attacks our breathing, which is like, why aren't we valuing more every breath that we're taking? We take it for granted, no? So that's very, very scary. And we also know that once the vaccines are out, the most vulnerable population is going to suffer the most, because they're going to get it last, instead of being the first one that gets it. No? If we were a more civilized humanity, that we understood that the less privileged should get it first, and then the people that have been isolated nicely in their homes and haven't been exposed to it. But we know that that's not going to happen. But let me come back to, because I think it's very important when you were talking about history, what would happen if this culture didn't exist? What would happen if we erased Hispanics? What would happen if we erased Asians? What would happen if we erased Black history? It's like, just open your eyes. Diversity has made us the most amazing planet possible. Learning from each culture, understanding your history, learning from your music, learning from your literature, learning from whatever you can call it. So we're not aware of that. So coming back to embracing diversity, because that's what made us this amazing global population.
What you're also talking about is immigration. And, immigration, if we think it's a hot button issue now, wait until the climate crisis really hits. Wait until people are forced to move, forced to leave because their land is uninhabitable. And that's going to happen in our lifetimes. I mean, it's already happening, but we're not seeing it to the extent that I think we're going to. There's a brilliant book called This Land is Our Land, An Immigrant's Manifesto by Suketu Mehta. I recommend everybody read it, because the points that it makes are that we should celebrate diversity. We should celebrate being multicultural. We should celebrate being together. And we should also acknowledge where we are. The fact that, like, I'm in Brooklyn sitting on my couch. This is Lenape land. Like, you have to kind of acknowledge that in your existence. You have to understand where you come from too. Like, I grew up in Colorado. I understand that that land was once Mexican territory. It was taken. You have to think about that. And cultures are embedded in the landscape. They just are. So if you're not thinking about how culture is embedded in the landscape or the cityscape even, you're not really living.
And just think of the irony, Spencer. What comes to mind when you travel? You feel yourself that you're exploring, that you're looking at new cultures, new territory. It's supposed to be this, oh, I travel. I'm a traveled person. That's supposed to be good, no? So if you embrace that diversity to the country where you're going to because you want to learn more about another country, why don't you do that in the street with the person in front of you? Why do you have to travel, I don't know how many miles on a plane or a boat or on foot to get to someplace where you treat nice other people because you went there, you paid to get there. And when they're here, that you see this amount of, speaking specifically here about Manhattan, where in the street, how many cultures do you see per block? How many nationalities? No, it's crazy, but we're not aware. We're not aware of all the benefits that we've gotten because of generosity. We're not paying attention to what we've got out of embracing immigration. We've not understood how our countries have benefited of everything that's made them more interesting because of this influx of the way different things are seen from different places, no? But again, I don't remember anybody telling these stories of what would happen. I mean, I just remember as a Mexican, there was this film done in Mexico, I don't know how many, maybe 10 years ago or 15 years ago, called A Day Without Mexicans. And it was a film about the United States, what would happen if there was a day without Mexicans in the US. So it really was like, yes, who would do certain types of jobs? Because, I mean, it was a more sarcastic approach, but we never fully understand how certain cultures embedded the beauty of us being more human. I mean, if we were all pushing an agenda of our humanity, not based on race, not based on education, not based on where I'm from, more based on our needs as humans in the planet, understanding what's better for us. No?
Yeah, mutual respect and mutual aid, which in times of crisis is a term we talk about a lot. I'm currently reading Rebecca Solnit's A Paradise Built in Hell. It's an amazing book about resilience in the face of trauma and tragedy. So it talks about 9/11 and 9/11 specifically from a perspective of locals, of how local New Yorkers banded together, how they were resilient. And there were a lot of narratives being woven during that time. But if you look at how people responded in the face of that, in the immediate aftermath, it was an incredible thing.
And that happens everywhere, Spencer. Our human nature is to respond and to be reactive in times of crisis like this, where we're more about how can I help? That happened in Mexico with the earthquake. It's the only moments in history that you would see civil society coming together to help each other. And it didn't matter if you had studied or not studied. It didn't matter your color of your skin. It didn't matter anything. You were there to help people get out of buildings that they were trapped. You wanted to save lives. And this is a recurrent theme everywhere. Our nature is to help. Our nature is to embrace each other. And that's what I come back to. It's a systemic problem. Governments and systems have divided us in order for them to have more power. And that's being exposed right now. The idea of, no, let's not let them get together. Well, sorry, guys, quarantine made us be more together than ever because we were in our homes when we were connected to the world. So this waking up, to me, as I see it in a very optimistic way, is that coming together, is that we're seeing what's happening. And I don't care if it's happening in the States. I'll do a protest in Mexico for George Floyd, and people in Berlin were doing it. It's not about the States or Berlin or what part of the world. This is inhumane. This cannot happen to us as humans, period.
To transition, I guess, to the urbanism conversation, which I think is important to have with you. I've been so fascinated with these protests, looking at architecture as a sort of protagonist. Like if you think about Barclays Center and the fact that, the protests and the videos, the photos, it almost served as much of a presence as the protesters themselves, as the police themselves. I mean, it became this thing. And then you have, landmarks like the Manhattan Bridge and the Brooklyn Bridge that also become these interesting interstitial spaces that function literally as bridges to take people physically from one place to another. But metaphorically, they're also functioning as bridges between people wanting to go from one place to another. And this goes back to Selma. I mean, this goes back to there's this strong, incredible history of bridges, of public squares, like what's outside of Barclays, or just 2 blocks from my apartment here, there's Cadman Plaza, which during normal times is a soccer field. You see people playing frisbee, and their dogs are running around. But just a few days ago, there was the George Floyd Memorial there with several thousand people, and all of a sudden, this space that's normally a public park is transformed into a site of a national vigil.
But let's take it back to one very, very important thing. The physical act of somebody walking. It means I'm not standing still. It means I'm not staying put. I'm not keeping my mouth shut. I'm not going to take this anymore. So just even the act of walking is a rebellious act against something. I need moment, I need momentum, and I need more people to walk with me. So that's an amazingly powerful metaphor to understand I'm not taking this anymore. I'm not staying put. I'm going to stand up and I'm going to protest for that, no matter where I'm from. So the physicality of moving towards something, I think, is incredibly powerful.
And choosing physical spaces through which to move that carry their own inherent power with them. I mean, that's...
But even understanding as urban developers and city planners and architects and sociologists, we need to have cities that provide that space for us. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're going to take the streets. We're going to take anything that's available. I mean, it doesn't matter if you design it good or bad. In any part of the world, a protest will happen no matter what. But I think we could design more generous cities that provide these spaces for people to do that.
Yeah, where a soccer field can become a site of a protest. I think it makes total sense. The more rigid our cities become, the less opportunity there's going to be for flexibility. And I think cities can function very much as a metaphor for the culture they inhabit.
We cannot design based on fear. We cannot be designing the future in these plastic bubbles because of the pandemic. And I don't want to come to a space where everything has sneeze guards and everything has like my temperature checked. It's like, that's a health problem. Let's put money in the health department. Let's pay more to the scientists, to the doctors, to everybody that needs to be fully on that in order for them to take care of what's going to happen in the future. But
from a design media perspective, let's stop promoting this stuff. Like, it doesn't make sense. Like, let's not feed the beast of fear. Let's feed the beast of hope,
100%.
The reality is like, some of these designs might get clicks on certain design websites, but like, we shouldn't be playing into that. I don't think that's the culture, and it's not interesting. It's not adding to a conversation. If anything, it's just a PR ploy in the midst of a pandemic when people should really be spending their time to help others in a much more meaningful way.
Totally. And again, I mean, that's the bad side, but there's also good sides, as we talked about this before, Spencer, that some parts in Europe that they were letting restaurants open, but the restaurant owner, for instance, said, I need 50 tables in order for my economy to be balanced, and you're only letting me open 10 tables. So the government said, okay, we'll close down the street in front of you for cars. We'll make that a space where you can take your other 40 tables out, space them out so there's this social distancing, it's okay, but have your 50 tables. And now, most of these people that own restaurants are asking the city to leave that street closed for pedestrians and closed for people to take the streets. Other great examples we know of is what's happening in Milan, that they're bringing in more vegetation within the city, that I hope that also happens in Mexico City as well.
And New York.
Yeah, we need it. But more connected to nature, more understanding of my responsibility to be more connected to the outside world, and not this total isolation of, if it's snowing outside, so I put the temperature up and now I'm sweating inside my office space, and then I come out again to the snow. It's like, how do you balance our understanding even of, is isolating that way the correct way, or should we be more tempered to the outside and have a better relationship to the climate in general? And,
Yeah.
and again, should I be in a car that long, or could I be walking or biking? All these countries now talking about implementing more bike lanes. So I think that those are the positive changes. The bad changes, which I always throw this in the conversation for people to just glimpse it. I always say, remember how our lives changed after 9/11. The way we travel after 9/11 changed dramatically. Now, everybody that would travel after 9/11 was treated like a terrorist. And that became a normal thing. My daughter doesn't remember a time of traveling where it wasn't like that. So if we implement things based on fear and we permit that to happen, that will become something that will be picked up by people. That's why most of the companies that we hear right now that are not letting their employees come back to work until 2021 is because they don't want to fix their offices and put the sneeze guards and invest all this money. They know maybe by 2021, we won't need the sneeze guards anymore.
So you're going to completely need to rethink a lot about the office, and it's far beyond sneeze guards. I mean,
100%.
Yeah. I think it's important in this part of the conversation to bring up memory, memorialization, thinking about space as a means to get us to remember, to feel. You know, I'm thinking about, because we were talking about parks, I'm thinking about Four Freedoms Park on Roosevelt Island, which is this incredible park that's basically a tribute to FDR and his Four Freedoms speech. So it's basically like built freedom. It's this idea of celebrating freedom through form. And, you know, it combines the weighty significance of this sort of memorial with the serenity of this park. And of course, it's, you know, this incredible Louis Kahn design that was finished posthumously nearly 30 years after his death. But I think that what's so special about that space, to go back to our slowdown conversation, that's what it is. It's a slowdown space. When you're there, you're encouraged to slow down, to engage nature, and also on a deeper level, if you want to, think about what it means to have freedom. Think about what FDR's Four Freedoms speech actually represents.
Exactly.
And it's not hammering it home in your face, which is also the beauty of that memorial and many memorials like it. A subject I've been actually spending, as you know, a lot of time researching and writing about, and have a book coming out this fall called In Memory Of with Fiden that's about contemporary memorials. So, you know, I've been thinking about this issue a lot because memorials are one of the only spaces where people really actually, regardless of your knowledge of architecture, feel something and remember it. Like, you never forget a memorial. Like, think about how many buildings in our lives we forget. We pass by, we don't really pay attention to. But when you see a memorial, especially one like Reflecting Absence, the World Trade Center, or Four Freedoms Park, or the Irish Hunger Memorial, or the Memorial for Peace and Justice in Montgomery, Alabama, or the Oklahoma City Bombing Memorial, all these sites carry such weight, carry such significance, and they're designed in such a way that you'll never forget them.
First of all, Spencer, the importance and the recognition of the other. I think that we're so detached of who the other is, that we think that the other is totally isolated from me. Unless it's somebody from my family that died immediately, then the other has more importance now, which is crazy, because we should talk about the other as we talk about us, as everybody. And I know this is a kind of a cliche, but but that's the reality. We all should, there are no others. We're totally the same. So the recognition of the other is super important. I remember we talked about this, the cover of the New York Times with the names of the people.
Or like you think about the power of, the end all be all memorial that really started this conversation was Maya Lin's Vietnam Veterans Memorial, which of course stemmed from some predecessors. But what set it really apart was you had this like sort of V-shaped sunken thing in the earth, a rift in the earth, I think was what she had referred to it as. And it's covered in the names of the war dead. And you can see yourself reflected in them, in the black granite. And you can rub your finger on the names. You can literally touch the names. And seeing all of those names carries such a profound weight because you see the damage done. You see the number of people who died, and you understand the significance of the void.
I'm just trying to think of what can change in future generations, Spencer. And I really hope that we would not need to use memorials to figure out our relationship to the other. I hope that our future generations are more intelligent than us and don't need to put monuments or memorials or things to make us remember, because they already found out how to have this relationship to the other. So if something happens to you, there's a certain mourning in general to understand that your death was important for us to do certain things, which is not happening today. And we talked about this also. How many people are dying of COVID-19? Are we, in a way, conscious of their death as something symbolic for whatever change will happen in the world? Where is that recognition as humans saying, I don't know who you are, I don't know you, but thank you. And I take it so as something as important that I'll really make sure that what we do as humanity for the next generations understands this change and this shift. So we don't see it that way. Somebody else died. It's not somebody close.
Well,
So
at the end of the day, what you're talking about, I think, is narrative. It's storytelling. And that we barely have any memory of the 1918 Spanish flu may explain, at least in part, the social, cultural, political amnesia that led us to this sort of catastrophic moment we now find ourselves in 100 years later. And it's probably no surprise that there aren't very many memorials to that flu. There just aren't. There's even limited literature. People didn't deal with the trauma in a way. I think a lot of it's about how do we deal with and respond to trauma, and how do we teach future generations about how to deal with and respond to trauma.
And how do we incorporate it in our everyday? It's like the protest, Spencer. It's not something that needs to happen right now. It needs to happen every single day. I don't want to go out and protest on 3 occasions or 4 occasions or 5 occasions. I want my life to be a protest. I want my life to be a recognition of somebody that died. I want my life to be an example of these changes in society, that my life becomes my practice of every single day. So when we have to come back to, let's remember, it's because your daily incorporation of the relevant things that will keep us in sync with nature and with our humanity is not there. Yeah. We need to remember, we need to go back, and somebody is like, why don't we incorporate in our life every single day something that is pursuing or fighting for justice, equality, diversity, all the things that should be incorporated every single day. Not when I find injustice and go out and fight for injustice.
Right.
Because it will happen over and over, no?
I think one of the things that we haven't also talked about is who's telling the story, who's in power to tell the story, who's the one who's funding the memorial, who's the one who is writing the book. And I say this as a white male. We've had too many white male voices, just too many. And too many people in positions of power pushing forward conversations that are so one note, one-sided, or single perspective. Per your point about multiculturalism and diversity and celebrating the other, if we're going to celebrate the other, we need other voices. We need a lot of other voices at the table. I think about what Bryan Stevenson and the Equal Justice Initiative did with their memorial in Montgomery. And that's a memorial that is incredibly powerful because there are multiple voices at the table. There's Mass Design Group, there's Hank Willis Thomas, there's a bunch of artists, there's sculptors, and it's that mix and the community engagement. I think that combination is where you create really special spaces. And I think connected to that is how we tell stories. I think we have to allow room, at least when it comes to talking about memory and memorial making, for vagueness, for abstraction, for understanding that like vagueness, when done carefully and with intent, it creates this array of connections between cultures, between individuals, emotions, like everybody to that sort of abstract experience can bring their own response, their own reading. They're allowed to actually like just enjoy the messiness and complexity and oftentimes contradiction of what an abstract memorial or site or story kind of says. They can embrace that chaos, and that can become like a bridge for them to connect in their own way to whatever it is. If we put on a pillar a statue of a Confederate soldier, let's say, that's a political move. That's not anything to do with memory or memorial making. And it's why we're seeing them getting torn down now.
And like, I mean, how many of these statues that we've seen are useless and are worthless and are just
oftentimes depicting terrible people?
Yes, but wanting to make a statement of power, of insecurity against the other because the other threatens me, because the other represents my own fears. It's like, what are you talking about? No, it's like, it's just crazy to even have them, no? So I think, again, it's this lack of recognition of what has made my life much better by embracing this diversity. Because just take it to the very simple knowledge of food. What? I'm only going to eat my hamburgers because I'm here in the States? So if you're embracing the culture or you're dancing to the music, why are you dancing to the music if you don't like what the other represents? Yeah. No? I mean, so that's kind of the contradiction, which is like, of course, it's our education, but you have to go back to educating people and having kids grow up saying, we are a human life. Our value is exactly the same. I should be valued for what I can bring to the table as a human, what I can bring with my values, not the amount of money that I've accumulated because the system is already planned for me to have a better future than your future. So you know what? Let's go back to this systemic thing and let's make it equal for everybody. And then let's see who is better. Not in terms of who made more money, but who made more connections as a generous human being to make communities thrive more and to make cities be better cities that are more balanced in everything.
I think it's important we talk a little bit about COVID in terms of how we're going to remember it. Because this is a really special period of time. Like, the At a Distance podcast I'm doing with Andrew, this is sort of a project we've created as like our own kind of, I don't know, for lack of a better term, PSA to the world about taking a more of a whole earth view of the situation and being able to think big picture when we're all constantly worried about tomorrow. How are you thinking about the work you're doing in that context? And I know you've been sort of proposing this incredible idea for a memorial in Times Square. So maybe it'd be interesting to hear a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, I think it, no matter what direction it takes, and happy that Eileen invited us to do this conversation. We were proposing something for Times Square that I think is, again, it's this importance of the recognition of the other. And Eileen and me have had these conversations about what would be a good contrast to have in Times Square. And we talked about like, why isn't kind of vegetation part of Times Square? Why isn't nature having a say in Times Square when you have all this technology and computers and the amount of density? And then when the pandemic started, there was this like, how can we have a temporary memorial and recognition of the other? How can we remember the names? How can we walk through something that has... So the first thing that came to mind was, why don't we do a small installation that resonates and makes us, as you said before, slow down in the most sped up or that had like super speed place in New York, which is Times Square, where people are walking like crazy, no? It's like, slow down. What happens if you have these concrete elements, that you have these 3-meter high wooden poles that represent kind of this forest, but they're engraved with the names, and they have LED lights on top. And at night, they become this lightning light field in Times Square, in the streets, in the sidewalks. And I can pass by and I can leave flowers. And the other thing that we were thinking, if I'm a family member, can I take my stick and bring it to my home and put it outside my house? Can it stay permanent outside of my house, like the white bicycles, or something that reminds me as I'm walking through the streets in New York or Jersey or Brooklyn or anywhere, if there's somebody that died from COVID-19, I know that in that building somebody died from COVID-19. So there is an empathy, there is a recognition of the other. And I mean, we're hoping that it happens. I think that even though it could not happen, just having it out there as an idea and showing people these not permanent memorials, but instant memorials that can happen for maybe a week, just to create this consciousness and awareness of the importance of others. So and I would love to see it for sure, no?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's a really important thing for us to be thinking about, you know, as the pandemic death toll continues to rise. It's now at more than 400,000 people worldwide. You know, we have to be thinking about memorialization on some level. And, you know, I agree with your point. Maybe we ultimately in the long term don't need physical memorials. Maybe these memorials become digital exercises. I know Maya Lin's actually working on an incredible memorial project, largely about nature and the environment right now, that's all digital. But I do think how we remember this virus when it's over, how will we remember all the people who were lost? You know, I think that these are really important conversations to be having. I've kind of been fantasizing about the idea of like an abstract, globally coordinated, uniformly designed COVID-19 memorial, with the idea that it would be installed in parks and cities and towns impacted around the world and featuring the names of the local dead. So the idea would be that, yeah, you could maybe have this digital searchable component also listing the names of the dead and their locations, but the design could exist in every town, in every city. And the notion is sort of that it could be like simple enough in construction so that it can be shipped and built anywhere, aesthetically singular enough so that it stands out, so that you know that's a COVID memorial, regardless of where you are. Something that it's like weighty enough that it has physical heft, you know, so it has substance, it's substantial, but it's cost efficient enough so as to actually be realizable. Maybe it's Corten steel, I'm not sure what the material is, but I feel like as an idea, yeah, it's maybe a bit of a pipe dream, but the notion of realizing something like that goes back to your idea of we're all connected. We're all linked.
I'm just thinking out loud again, what would happen? And I can't remember what time we were doing it here in the States compared to Mexico, but what was it, 8 o'clock, where people would clap?
7 o'clock in New York.
7 o'clock. Yeah. So what would happen if we made that a thing, that we would honor the people that have died just by having maybe an hour of reflection, of introspection, of saying, these amount of people died today, or these amount of people are not with us anymore. So just imagine the power of the energy of people putting that hour or those 20 minutes of that hour.
Seconds.
Huh?
I mean, the reality is it could be 20 seconds. It could be 60 seconds. And, you know, in the media landscape, that's what it could be. Like, imagine if you're on Instagram and it just forces you to like stop looking at it for 20 seconds, or God forbid you're watching Fox News and for 20 seconds. I mean, they would never do this, but for 20 seconds, if it, you know.
Why not? I mean, I was coming back to even thinking that the newspapers that you still have the amount of dead people at I can't remember the section, but people that were reading newspapers, they would acknowledge the people that died during that month or that week in their community. And it kind of lost power. So when we also saw the cover of the New York Times with the names, it was like super shocking. And they were not even the amount of people that had died. They were just, I can't remember the number, but it was just a small portion. And again, it's like, don't disconnect. How do we do things that keep us connected as humans and keep
How
us?
do we engage our humanity? How do we remember? And what do we remember? And how do we tell everybody's stories, not just these singular voices?
100%.
This is fun. I love talking to you always, Michelle. It's so great to
Likewise, Spencer. Thanks for engaging, and Eileen, thanks for inviting us to have this conversation, and hope to see everybody a bit more aware and conscious of what we need to change from our own personal perspectives. No.
Mm.
Thank you, Michelle and Spencer, for your time and your energy and your sharing. I'm most touched and hope to see such a monument to those lost worldwide in this unfathomable yet real pandemic. And thank you to all of you for joining us. Design Talks Now will continue through July, so please visit our website and see our future talk schedule. And in the meanwhile, stay safe, stay smart. Design stands together.